I'm Carla Schroer of Cultural Heritage Imaging, and this is a video about the database that's part of the Digital Lab Notebook software, how to manage that database, including backup and restore your data so that you can move it to other computers. Let's get started. So right now we're in the Digital Lab Notebook software. Here's the prepare screen. If this is not familiar to you, you may want to go check out some of the other videos so that you understand how to work with the software. At the very top, there is a menu for the database, and that gives us functionality like backup and restore. Those are the primary things I'm going to do from this menu. I'm going to choose backup, and but before I actually back up my database, I want to talk about the database and how it's used by the DLN for a minute. So the software, when you install it, installs a copy of a free Postgres database inside the Digital Lab Notebook software folder structure. So we have our own copy, and it won't interfere with that database if you happen to be using Postgres in another application. And the Digital Lab Notebook software is desktop software. There's Mac version, there's a Windows version. The source code is available if you want to build it for another platform. You do not need an internet connection once you have installed the software. It's local software on your computer. And so you need to think about and understand the database in that it's there to collect the information that we are creating about our imaging project. So our equipment and our processing steps, our workflows, our actual imaging work, our projects and image bundles, all of that information is stored in the database to make it really easy for us to reuse that information. So if I do multiple different imaging techniques on the same subject, I can make one subject record and then I can apply that to all of those different things. And it also allows me to group things and just make it much, much easier when I'm doing the imaging to reuse all of the information I already have available. But the database itself is not the output for the Digital Lab Notebook. What we're really trying to produce are high quality metadata records to go with our image sets and our work products from our imaging work. And that we're going to do through creating submission information packages, or SIPs. And there's another video that talks about that part of the system. So the database helps us do our work and manage our work, but the output is really this other metadata in the SIPs. So why would I want to back up my database? Well, one, just so that I have a copy, but also so that I could put the data on another computer. Let's say I have a primary computer in my studio, and I'm going to be doing work out in the field, so I want to use it on my laptop. I can back up the data from the database, and I can restore it in the version on my laptop. And then I can do that work out in the field, I can back it up from there, and I can restore it back to my primary computer. It's really important to understand that in version 1 of the Digital Lab Notebook, we have simple backup and restore, but we can't sync across two databases. So you really need to think about what's your primary copy of the data in your database, and keeping that, only editing that or adding to that one at a time, on one computer at a time, and then restoring it where you might need it. If two different people are working on two different computers adding information, you have now forked that database. And that may be okay for your purposes if they're working on different projects, but you're not going to be able to bring those back together into the same database. So it's something to be aware of in how you're thinking about and planning working with the DLN. So let's go back to our administration tasks here, our backup. What it lets us do is choose where on our hard drive we want to back up the file and what we want to name it. Now, by default, it's going to look in a folder inside the installation of the Digital Lab Notebook. And there are a couple of database backups there already. One is an empty database because we start with sample data that goes along with the user guide and allows you to play with it and get familiar with the DLN. But let's say you're ready to do your own work and you want to start with a clean database. You can restore this empty one, or let's say you've been messing around with the sample data and you want to get back to kind of a clean version of the sample data, you can restore that as well. but we don't have write access into this folder. So we're going to need to save it somewhere else on our computer. And what I'm going to do is save it to a folder that I've created on my desktop right now called DLN databases. And I'm just going to call this like test 2 because I don't really need to keep this. You would name it hopefully something a little more useful, and then when you click save, you can come back over here, and that was just setting the path and the name. You're going to click backup to actually do the backup. It's pretty fast. It says it was created. You can say okay, and now I have that copy on my hard drive. But let's say I want to restore a database. It's the same idea. I just go to restore, and it's going to start again in that local folder. Let's say I want to have an empty database, so I'm going to choose that one and say open, and it's going to push my little window behind the main window. So I have to go find that. And so I'm going to click restore. It's going to remind me that this will actually overwrite my data. So I need to say okay to let it do that, and that database was restored. Okay, and then it needs to restart the software in order to reinitialize the database. Say okay, and then up pops our database, which is great. And so now if I go to the prepare screen and look at equipment, for example, there's no data in there. However, the empty database that we provide does include the user-defined types. And if you don't know what those are, go look at the Getting Started video because they're explained there. And they're all available on the edit menu. So let's say I want to set up roles for stakeholders. Even with the empty database, you're going to start with the ones that we defined. You can delete those, you can modify them, you can add to them, whatever makes sense for your work, but it gives you some things to get started with for the user-defined types. So that's it for databases. Make sure to check out the rest of the videos in the series, download the user guide, and check out the forums if you have questions. Thanks for watching.